What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it is Thursday, which means it is time for our weekly redraft. I started this series last week with the 2020 redraft. You can go check that out, but I probably should have started with the 2019 redraft. 2020, those guys are still far too young and far too inexperienced. So today we have the 2019 draft. When looking at the 2019 draft, this was the original top 10. Hughes, Kakko, Doc, Byram, Turcotte, Seider, Cousins, Broberg, Zegras, Podkolzin. When looking at this, there's definitely some guys that are going to be taken out. There's 5 or 6 guys that are going to stay in it, but you definitely have your fair share of busts in this draft. When looking at the number 10 spot, I think there's, again, a top 9 that is pretty clear in my opinion. That 10 spot is wide open. Some guys that just barely missed out on that. Alex Newhook, Kaliev, Cam York, Dustin Wolf just barely missed out. He just doesn't have the NHL experience yet. I still think he's an elite goalie prospect, but I'm not going to put in a guy that has like 5 games played thus far. Dmitry Voronkov has been fantastic for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was actually a year older. He should have been in the 2018 draft, but he's killing it. And Bobby Brink also almost made it. There's a bunch of other guys that you can make an argument for. At number 10, though, I ended up going with Thomas Harley. Originally, the Canucks took Podkolzin here, which obviously did not work out in their favor. You look at Thomas Harley, he has been fantastic for the Dallas Stars this year, up to 21 points in 40 games, fully breaking out this season, especially of late with Miro Heiskanen going down the past 6 games. He has 4 points in his last 6 games, playing 23-29 a night. He's really assuming that almost number 1 role since Heiskanen has gone down. He was very solid 2 years ago when he made his first NHL debut because they had some injuries, and this season he's really built off it. He matured at the AHL level for a while. Doesn't have the track record of some of the guys you could have gone in this spot, but I think going forward, he is going to be a very good top 4 defenseman, maybe even top pair when he peaks. I don't know if he's going to be top pair on the Dallas Stars, considering they do have Miro Heiskanen. But when looking at Harley, I think he would have been a really good fit on the Vancouver Canucks as the guy right behind Quinn Hughes as a left-handed defenseman, and especially when you look at their defense core the previous years. Defense core is obviously looking this good right now. I think having a young guy like Thomas Harley would have been very good for them, especially back in 2019. They already had Besser, who broke out. Pettersson just won the Calder. Going defenseman here would have probably been the pick, and going with the guy like Thomas Harley. Next up, the Anaheim Ducks selected Trevor Zegras 9th overall. Now they are still getting a center. They are going with Kirby Doc, and Kirby Doc looked very good in his first 2 games this season, then obviously tragically tears his ACL 2 games in after having 2 points. I watched some of both of those games. I thought he was really looking poised to take that next step. I think the Chicago Blackhawks really messed with his development by throwing him out there immediately, and obviously he did deal with some injuries, dealt with some injuries last year, ended up missing 24 games, had 38 points in 58 games, 54 points. It was by far his best season yet. Looked like he was trending in the right direction. I still think he can end up being a solid number 2 center on the Montreal Canadiens going forward. I don't think he's ever going to reach that high number 1 center that we maybe expected from him on draft night, given his stature, his physical tools that he had, as well as a lot of skill. So in looking at Kirby Doc, definitely not a bust by any means. And again, even on draft night, I remember he was supposed to go like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. 3rd was a little bit of a surprise. Looking at a Kirby Doc, I still think he's progressing pretty well and definitely needs to be, he's firmly in that top 9. Number 8. The Edmonton Oilers did take Philip Broberg. They're going to stick with the defenseman as well, and they are going to take Bowen Byram. Bowen Byram has obviously had a very, very up and down career as of late, dealing with concussions, dealing with a plethora of injuries. He's hurt right now as I film this, has not been able to stay healthy, had not a disappointing rookie year because Colorado was loaded, but first season, 2 points in 19 games. Then the second and third seasons, he has 15 goals, 26 assists, 41 points. In just 72 games, he was looking like he was trending to become that absolutely fantastic defenseman. Then this season, a disappointing only 12 points in 39 games on the Colorado Avalanche before dealing with an injury. I know he's not in the best situation in terms of his development, with guys like Taze and Makar obviously being better than him and Sam Girard as of right now, but I still expected more, at least at the start of this season. I still think he can turn into a solid top pairing guy. Will it happen in Colorado? I'm not sure, because they could probably trade him for a more immediate win now piece, and that you could argue that is the move given their defenseman depth. They need a second line center. They don't really need a number 4 defenseman as of right now. So I think if he ended up going to Edmonton, yes, they did have Bouchard, but Bouchard's right-handed, Bowen Byram's left-handed. I think that would have worked out in terms of them bolstering their defense core, because obviously they wanted defense. They did take Broberg. So I think Byram is by far the second best defenseman in this draft class as of right now. We'll see how the rest of the draft class develops, but I think Bowen Byram to the Edmonton Oilers makes a lot of sense. 7th overall, the Buffalo Sabres, they obviously took Dylan Cousins. They're going to stick with the center as well. They're going to go with Trevor Zegras. And yeah, Trevor Zegras, I still hold him in a high regard. Before this season, he probably would have been 4th or 5th in the redraft, but I do have to knock him down because obviously he just has 7 points in 20 games before, unfortunately, breaking his ankle. Last 3 guys, Zegras, Byram, Doc, all dealing with serious injuries. Well, Byram's not as serious, but I think Byram should be back in like a week or 2. But when you look at Trevor Zegras, again, 61 points in his rookie year, Calder runner-up, then 65 in his second year. Looks like he's at least going to stay there, then kind of falls off. I still think he has the talent. Again, whether he can be a number 1 center, that's another thing. Whether he can even be a center at all, given his defensive play, I will definitely hear out those arguments, but I still think people are overreacting to 20 games versus the previous 150 that he played when he was playing at mid 60-point pace. I think we do need to take a step back. Zegras obviously did get overhyped because of his marketability, but I don't think anybody was ever saying this guy's going to be an eventual Hart winner or anything like that. So I think Zegras is underrated kind of right now. I know that might be a hot take, but I think he's so overhated that he has become somewhat underrated. And when you look at Buffalo, obviously Tage Thompson did break out. They didn't have Tage Thompson back in 2019, but they went center back in 2019. So I think a guy like Zegras would fit in pretty well in Buffalo. He is from New York. He's not near the Buffalo area, more so the New York City area, but a little bit of a homecoming. And it has been rumored, it was rumored before the season that the Sabres were apparently in Zegras talks. Obviously nothing materialized there. But looking at Trevor Zegras, still going to be a at least good second liner going forward. I still think he can return to 60, maybe even 70-point pace. Number 6, the Red Wings ended up going with Moritz Seider in the original draft. Now they are going to go with Michelli. Michelli, obviously, amazing rookie year, 49 points in 64 games. Arguably would have won the goddamn Calder if he played north of 75 games. I didn't have him in my top 3 because, again, he did miss 18 goddamn games, but he was fantastic, led all of rookies in points per game, did it on a second line in Arizona that was pretty goddamn talent deprived. Obviously, Schmaltz, Hayden, and Keller really cooked last year. Michelli was on his own, driving his own line. He's one of the best passers in the entire NHL, and this season, he yet again is around the same pace, 29 points in 41 games, so on pace for 58 points. I think going forward, he's going to be a very, very good second liner for the Arizona Coyotes. And when looking at the Red Wings with this pick, they were still really early on in their rebuild, so it doesn't really matter in terms of position. They obviously ended up going with Seider, but I think they still would have taken a winger if knowing what they know, the difference between what Zegras is doing this season versus Michelli. I think you would tend to lean with Michelli. Number 5, Alex Turcotte ended up going to the LA Kings. Obviously, I'm not going Alex Turcotte in this, unfortunately, because he's dealt with a shit ton of concussions and injuries. But I'm going to go with Dylan Cousins, the workhorse from Whitehorse. Obviously broke out last year, 31 goals, 36 assists, 67 points. Not having quite the same season, having a bit of a down year like a Trevor Zegras third-year slump, but not nearly as bad as Trevor Zegras. He has 7 goals, 15 assists, 22 points in 41 games, so he's on pace for only 44 points, but he hasn't fallen off like a Trevor Zegras. The underlying numbers are still good. The main thing with him is his finishing, which I do think will rebound. Again, 31 goals last year. Thus far, halfway through the season, exactly 7 goals, so on pace for 14 goals. But the underlying numbers still show that he is a very good player. I still believe he is going to be the Buffalo Center's second line center for the future. So I think the LA Kings, when looking at this, when they went with Alex Turcotte, they were expecting kind of a forward for the future. Obviously, this was before Quinton Byfield. I can't apply previous. When looking at this, I'm doing it based on before that night. Like knowing what we know now on that night, not factoring in the prior year's picks, if that makes sense. So like knowing what we know now on late June, whatever, how it goes, how their careers would develop. Fourth overall, the Avalanche, who originally went with Bowen Byram, end up going with Cole Caulfield. I think they go with Cole Caulfield. Avalanche obviously got McCarr 2 drafts ago, so I think they go with the skilled goal-scoring winger, even though they obviously have a Mikko Rantanen that is broken out by then. But when looking at Cole Caulfield, last year, 48 goal pace, 26 goals in 46 games, absolutely balled out. His shooting has really fallen off this season, but I think he's shooting at a higher rate, just not finishing, obviously. He's only shooting 7% versus 14% in the prior 2 seasons, 120 game sample size. So when looking at that, I think that's due to bounce back. And he still has a solid 13 goals, 18 assists, 31 points in 43 games. A little bit more playmaking from Cole Caulfield this season. So although he might not be the eventual Rocket winner that we thought, I still think he's going to be at least a 35 to 40 goal guy. Again, just the high volume that he's able to shoot with, and he's still generating in terms of expected goals. Just not getting that puck luck this season like he did maybe last year. Still think he's a future 40 and 40 level guy, especially on that Canadiens core that is growing rapidly, and I think is going to be one of the better teams in 3 to 4 years. Put him on the Colorado Avalanche with Nathan MacKinnon on that power play. Cole Caulfield and goddamn Mikko Rantanen would be disgusting, so I think they end up going with Cole Caulfield. At number 3, this might be a little bit controversial. This was the Chicago Blackhawks. I think they go with Moritz Seider. I know some people are probably screaming at me right now, but I think they go with Moritz Seider. For Chicago, their rebuild was kind of just starting this year, so they just go with whoever they think the best player available is. Moritz Seider walked into the league, put up 50 points. That was kind of his best season thus far. I still think he's going to be a good number 1 in the league, but I have not seen him take that next step. And especially this year, it was looking like he was taking that next step offensively. Started off very good, but in his last 18 games, only has 6 points. I have him in fantasy. He's killing me this year. He still puts up monster hits and block shots. But when looking at him, I think Moritz Seider can eventually develop into a top 25, top 20, top 15 defenseman. I think after not seeing him take the steps the past 2 years, I don't know if he's ever going to develop into this Norris caliber guy or a consistent top 10 defenseman that we were expecting after that Calder winning 50-point season. So when looking at Moritz Seider, again, still a fantastic player, not trying to shit on him, but I do have Matthew Boldy at number 2 instead of Capo Caco. Matthew Boldy, and when you look at this, I'm going to break it down like this. The New York Rangers, before the draft happened, they traded for Adam Fox, who was dominant at the college level, was their right-hand defenseman of the future. And a week before the draft, they traded for Jacob Trouba, who is another right-handed defenseman. So that's also why I don't go with Moritz Seider, another right-handed defenseman in this redraft. I go with a guy like Capo Caco because guess who they didn't have before this draft? They got him a week or 2 later. They got Artemi Panarin. So in looking at Matthew Boldy, I think he would be that elite young winger that the New York Rangers needed in their system to really build off of, instead of Capo Caco, who obviously is not looking good right now. Lafreniere is looking solid, but let's be honest, he's definitely breaking out in part because Artemi Panarin's playing so goddamn good. And when looking at Matthew Boldy, what has he been early on in his career? He's already a solid 30-30 guy while being amazing defensively. One of the best defensive wingers in the entire NHL in the past 3 years. And you look at him, especially the back half of last year, he was playing fantastic. Since March 11th of 2023, he has 29 goals, 20 assists, 49 points in 52 games. Obviously, Minnesota had a little bit of a rough start this year, but he's still doing solid. I still think he's going to score at least 30 goals, probably around 60 points. And I think going forward, he has the potential to be a 40-40 guy. And unlike Cole Caulfield, actually be great defensively. I am a big fan of Matthew Boldy. I would slightly take him over Moritz Seider. And when you consider the Jacob Trouba and the Adam Fox deals that happened before the draft, I think when you take into account team needs, I think Matthew Boldy is the pick for the New York Rangers at 2nd overall. And guess who's at 1st overall? Take a random shot. It's Jack Hughes. Great picture of Jack Hughes used there. He was the number 1 prospect for a reason. It wasn't that close. Ranger fans obviously cheered when the Devils ended up taking Jack Hughes because they wanted Capo Caco. Really stupid, legendary clip. But he's been fantastic. 2 years ago, 56 points in 49 games. Really broke out that year. Then 99 and 78 last year. Then this year, 45 and 32 before getting hurt. another guy on my fantasy team that's killing me, and he was on pace for 115 points. Always had great underlying numbers after, well, his rookie year was pretty bad, not gonna lie. He was just way too small. But his second year, even though he wasn't producing at a high rate, had fantastic numbers. It just, he couldn't finish for shit, and he still was too small. This guy's transitional play is I'd argue this season it was better than McDavid's. He was the best player in the entire NHL in transition, and the fact that he has developed something of a shot now, it's one of the most scary things I have seen in the entire league. He's a top 10 player in the league, no doubt. If he stayed healthy this season, he probably would have been in my top 5. I think next year, fully healthy, he's going to be a top 5 player in the entire NHL. But that is the final. Jack Hughes to the Rangers, Jack Hughes to the Devils, Matthew Boldy to the Rangers, Sider to the Hawks, Caulfield to the Avalanche, Cousins to the Kings, Michelli to the Red Wings, Zegras to the Sabres, Byram to the Oilers, Doc to the Ducks, I like that, and Harley to the Canucks. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.